Today we're going to talk about that awkward moment when you discover that your truth isn't the truth. Bummer, dude. There are 4 words we will often hear used to describe different kinds of truth. Unless you're in a room full of philosophers, that can get tiresome. It becomes unnecessarily complicated. Subjective, objective, relative, and absolute. What is subjective truth? Subjective means influenced by or based on personal perspective, opinion, feeling, experience. And the argument goes like this. Premise 1. Our senses and perceptions are subjective. Premise 2. Everything we know is based on our senses and perceptions. Therefore, everything we know is subjective. So a person who believes that all truth is subjective will say that all truth is subjective because everything we know is based off our own input, senses, perception, yada yada yada. The immediate problem with that statement is simple. Someone says, truth is subjective. You reply, is it objectively true that all truth is subjective? If it is, the statement is false. If it is not, it's just your personal opinion and it need not have any influence over me. We do indeed have senses and we do indeed perceive the world individually. We have opinions, we have reason, we have memory, we have emotion, and we do know things based on these inputs. Paradoxically, if you claim that there are in fact subjective states, that these states really do exist, then you are in effect holding to the existence of subjective truths or states as an objective fact about the world. Now, no one can assert a truth claim without being in some mental state, and thus in some state of subjectivity. But that's not to say that all truth is subjective because of what we subjectively know. Still with me? Objective is the opposite of subjective. What is objective truth? If something is objective, it has correspondence with reality, shared reality. Objective truth is something that is true for all people, always, whether we agree with it or not, and regardless of how we feel about it. My niece said to me the other day, Ferrari is the coolest car ever made. And me, not knowing how to talk to a 10-year-old child, went on a little bit of a rant about truth. I said that's a subjective statement. It's simply your opinion, and you are just one person in a near infinite sea of people. There's no way to measure that statement against reality. It can't be evaluated apart from the opinions of other people, whether they agree or disagree with the statement. But neither way means that the statement is objectively true. It doesn't matter if it's a popular opinion or a not so popular opinion. It doesn't make it true or false. Enter the "it's my truth" generation. At one time in the not so distant past, my truth was simply and more accurately termed my opinion. An objective statement is a fact. It is independent of one's own feelings or biases. Bias. If I say I own an iPhone 6s, I'm making an objective statement. I either do or I don't. It's not my opinion, it's a fact. This is an iPhone 6s, and it's my property. If this isn't my property, or if it isn't an iPhone 6s, the statement is false. The truth or falsehood of the claim doesn't depend on my subjective opinion. Now, in recent years, objective truth has been attacked, and the root reason, in my opinion, is that objective truth leads to God, and the world naturally seeks to do away with God. Within the past 30 years or so, a new kind of response has become popular. Instead of treating the statement, God exists, as objective, as something that is either true or false, is now treated as something that is subjective. Instead of agreeing or disagreeing with the statement, God exists, the response might be something like, that's your truth. God might exist for you, but not for me. The focus has changed from objectivity, which, as mentioned, seeks correspondence with the real world, to subjectivity, which depends on the subject making the statement. And of course, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but it's that paradox that subjective opinion has been elevated to the same level as objective truth, as fact, as if how I feel is a fact of the real world, that your subjective experience of reality is objectively true because there's no such thing as objective truth. What? If a person embraces his truth or her truth or their truth, then everyone else ought to embrace it as true too, especially in politically correct matters like gender. Gender was considered an objective issue. A person was either male or female, and that was based on a set of external, objective, and verifiable criteria. Now, certain cultural forces are attempting to make gender a subjective matter, and in many cases, in many lives, succeed. A biological male who subjectively believes that he is a female is simply embracing his truth. And even though the transgender person's gender is subjective, the whole world must treat that subjective truth as objective, as if it fully conforms to reality. People who make such arguments, not just concerning gender, defeat themselves. These people defeat themselves with their own logic. Truth is my favorite. Truth is unaffected by our attempts to redefine it according to our opinions and feelings. Try as we might, there's nowhere to run. FYI, postmodernism doesn't deny the existence of objective truth, but it does deny that we can ever know it for certain, because we are all swayed by cultural forces and biases, things that cloud our judgment. In postmodern thinking, it can only be ignorance or pride or both that allows a person to say, God exists, I know this for sure. However, when postmodernists say it's impossible to know anything for sure, they are making an objective statement. If it is impossible to know anything for sure, how can you possibly know that it is impossible to know anything for sure? Sometimes you'll hear yourself or others use the terms relative and subjective interchangeably. This isn't necessarily wrong, but they do mean different things. So let's define them both. Once again, subjective means based on or influenced by personal feelings, tastes, opinions. Relative means existing or possessing a specific characteristic only in comparison to something else. So subjectivity is personal, it's the opposite of objectivity. Relativity is relational. The only way we can observe or judge according to relativism is in comparison to something else. Relativism is the opposite of absolutism. A moral absolutist may say that killing, no matter what, is wrong, and that's a dubious thing to say, because we could easily compare two situations that involve killing, say murder and self-defense, and we can discern a important difference. So here, in this example, the statement killing is wrong is relative to the circumstance. In one scenario, it's wrong, while in another, it was a necessary means of defense. We might say that it was justified. That statement, though, is an interesting one to me. There is reason behind the relativity of the statement, killing is wrong. However, from an understanding that life is sacred, that really and truly no one has the right to take a life, it's not ours to take, you could argue that killing a human being is always morally wrong, while at the same time understanding the relativity of the circumstance. If we reduce goodness to mean the well-being of conscious creatures, which is a view I've often come across when in conversation with atheists and agnostics, and if these brain states, this well-being, is affected by culture and other circumstantial factors. So, for example, not eating meat in culture A improves the well-being, the brain states of people in culture A, while simultaneously, in culture B, eating meat also improves the brain states, the well-being of the people in culture B. This is an example of how relative cultures and morality can lead to different conclusions about what human beings ought to do or ought not to do. We can claim that throwing acid in someone's face is wrong, as long as it meets the criteria we have set. To be a relativist means that nothing is ever absolutely true or false, right or wrong, good or bad. It's a problematic view. It's not livable. Consider this statement. I know that you don't believe I'm a baked potato, but I do. So it's true for me. What does that mean? It means that I believe I'm a baked potato, or that the moon is made of cheese, or that Tupac is still alive. To say that something is true for me doesn't add truth to the statement. It doesn't make it true. You're merely saying that you believe something, and believing something doesn't make it true. I'm not a baked potato, though life would be much simpler. The moon isn't a wheel of cheddar, and Tupac is dead. Those things are true for me and you. The truth exists independently of your own beliefs, and relativism is logically incoherent. Now, a relativist may claim in response that the proposition that truth is relative, that statement, is the only one objective truth, and all other truths are relative. Apart from that being ridiculous, you've got a problem. This response is an infinite regress argument. You'd have to construct a new proposition over and over and over again. All truth is relative except the claim that all truth is relative except the claim that all truth is relative. And on it would go. Relativism is either self-refuting or straight up trivial. But relativism is seductive. It enables people to be passive towards evil, injustice. It enables people to confuse an inability to know the truth with there being no truth. I don't know if there is intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, but intelligent life either exists or it doesn't exist elsewhere in the universe. My inability to determine the truth of the proposition is irrelevant to the actual truth. Similarly, you may not know whether God exists, but God either exists or doesn't. The fact that you don't know 2 + 2 doesn't mean there's no solution. It means you're bad at math, or you haven't learned it yet. An inability, for whatever reason, to distinguish truth from falsity isn't evidence for relativism. This leads to a related idea. All of us need to not confuse the fervency the zeal of our belief with that belief being true. You may be utterly convinced that God does exist, but that doesn't make it true. Belief has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of a proposition or a claim. The strength of your belief or lack of belief in something isn't evidence for the truth of relativism. Okay. What is absolute truth? Absolute truth is inflexible reality. It is fixed, invariable, unalterable fact. For example, there are absolutely no square circles and there are absolutely no circular squares. Absolute truth is a logical necessity. Atheistic humanists, however, argue against the existence of absolute truth. Humanism excludes God, which necessitates moral relativism. John Dewey, co-author and signer of the Humanist Manifesto, said this: "There is no God, and there is no soul. Hence, there are no needs for the props of traditional religion. With dogma and creed excluded, then immutable truth is also dead and buried. There is no room for fixed natural law or moral absolutes." Thing is, Dewey, no disrespect, you can't logically argue against the reality, the existence of absolute truth. Because to argue against something is to establish that there is a truth. You can't argue against absolute truth unless an absolute truth is the basis of your argument. Consider these classical arguments made against the existence of absolute truth. There are no absolutes. Really? Is that absolutely true? The statement is logically contradictory. Truth is relative. Again, this is an absolute statement, implying that truth is absolutely relative. Nope. Logically contradictory. Doesn't correspond with reality. If a statement is relative, it means it's not always true. And if truth is relative, is not always true, sometimes truth is not relative. This means there are absolutes. The statement's false. Who can know what the truth is? In the same sentence, the person claims that no one knows what the truth is. Then the person turns and asks those who are listening to affirm the truth of their statement. What? Philosophers will spend an inordinate amount of time toiling over the meaninglessness of everything. Meaningless, everything is meaningless. Yet their very toil implies that there is some meaning to be found, that there is meaning to the statement, everything is meaningless. Then there are philosophy teachers who will teach their students that no one person's opinion is more valid than another's. We all have our own truth. Then they'll grade their students' papers. Morality is a facet of absolute truth. Moral relativists often declare it's wrong for you to impose your morals onto others, or it's wrong for you to force your religion on your children. I believe Richard Dawkins is notably guilty of both of those statements. See, by declaring that something is wrong, that to do such and such a thing is wrong, is to impose your morals on someone else. You can't be appalled by any injustice, by any evil, unless an absolute truth has somehow been violated. If we all create our own reality, moral accountability is a figment of our imaginations. And so if a relativist has a problem with a statement of absolute morality, he should take it up with himself. Okay, let's summarize. That was a lot. The claim that all truth is relative is either incoherent or trivial. It is not a livable reality. It is neither supported by our inability to know the truth, nor by the fervency of our belief. Does that mean that there are no relative truths? No, there are relative truths. Like, LA is close to NYC. Chocolate tastes better than vanilla. But the claim that all things are relative is incoherent. It's illogical. The illogical denial of absolute, universal truth and the cultural relativism that comes with it are the result of a society that has embraced the theory of evolution as the explanation of life. If naturalistic evolution is true, life has no meaning, no purpose. Man is free to live as he pleases and is accountable to no one. Love doesn't exist in that environment, just so you know. The Bible declares what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. The Bible describes the role of human consciousness in Romans 2. Indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law, since they show that the requirements of the law were written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts now accusing, now even defending them. This will take place on the day when God will judge men's secrets through Jesus Christ, as my gospel declares. All worldviews attempt to give meaning and definition to life. Humanity has an inborn desire for something more than mere existence. Humans seek God, because God is who we were made for. We seek hope for the future. We seek forgiveness, peace in the midst of struggle. We seek answers. Religion is really evidence that mankind is more than a sophisticated, intelligent animal. It's evidence of a higher purpose and the existence of a personal, purposeful creator. And if there is indeed such a creator, he is the standard for absolute truth. It's his authority that establishes that truth.